Former Vice President Mike Pence says the Trump administration needs to be more transparent about the Jeffrey Epstein case. Pence sat down with our Major Garrett on the takeout yesterday. Here is some of that conversation.
President Trump said the Jeffrey Epstein matter is a hoax. Last week, his Justice Department said there were more than 1,000 victims of Jeffrey Epstein. Last summer, Trump said he was open to declassifying all the relevant files and the Epstein client list, and that his suicide looks suspicious. How can all those things be true and it be a hoax? I don't understand where things stand with all this.
I think the time has come for the administration to release all of the files regarding Jeffrey Epstein's investigation and prosecution. It's important that we protect the names of the victims. They should be excluded from any disclosure. But whether or not the facts justify charges, I think that anyone who participated or was associated with this despicable man ought to be held up to public scrutiny.
One of the most aggressive investigative reporters in our country, Julie K. Brown, was on my show last night, and she said when the Justice Department last week said 1,000 victims, she said that was a higher number than she was familiar with and indicated to her that there have to be accomplices. Accomplices that some of the victims have named that worked with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And she said, shouldn't there be some inquiry into whether or not those people should be exposed to criminal prosecution? Well, do you agree with that?
I just think we ought to get the facts to the American people. I mean, I've always believed in transparency.
And when the president says it's all a hoax, what is he talking about?
Well, Jeffrey Epstein's prosecution began during the Bush administration, continued.
He's blaming it on Democrats.
The Obama years.
It's not a hoax.
I know of no reason why this administration, once the victims' names are protected, should not release all the files on Jeffrey Epstein.
Understood.
And CBS News chief Washington correspondent Major Garrett is joining me to talk more about this. Major, fascinating interview, and you essentially asked the question that is on everybody's mind who's not politically connected to this, right? And it does seem as if Donald Trump and his supporters have backed themselves into a corner. They fed fire to this conspiracy theory. They used it to campaign. They used it to help Donald Trump get elected. And now he's the deep state, if that's the word that we're using, and he should have the power to release these files. And you also had the Attorney General go on Fox News and say, yeah, I got them right here. I'm looking through them. So you're seeing this divide now on the Hill between Republicans who want to see these files released and those who are sort of towing the line with the president trying to do a head fake by suggesting it's the Democrats. What was most fascinating to you about Pence's reaction to all this?
Well, good morning, Vlad. It's great to be with you. And just a quick explanation to the viewers. Not in the fancy studio. We have a power outage here in the neighborhood in D.C., so we don't have any video services right now in the Bureau. We hope to get them back, so we're doing everything via Zoom. Welcome to my blurred office. The most interesting thing that Vice President Pence said is that which the president he once served has a very hard time dealing with. The imperative to release the files while protecting the victims' identities so all who are curious about the Jeffrey Epstein matter, how he was being prosecuted, are there accomplices? Were there people who helped Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein in their sex trafficking, human trafficking, predatory behavior? All of these things are real issues. For those in the MAGA movement, the way the Jeffrey Epstein case was handled, and to their minds, grotesquely mishandled, represents elites protecting elites, and maybe some aspect of the U.S. intelligence community overlaying those elites protecting elites. And that sort of goes to the crux of what many in the MAGA movement believe is fundamentally flawed about the federal government. Whether or not that's true, they believe it, and they believe it with such an ardor that this has become the first significant and sustained division within the ranks of MAGA that I have seen, and I started covering Trump and that movement in 2015.
So the president, as you know, Major, has responded to critics. I want to play a bit of what he had to say yesterday, and then let's talk about it.
It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats, and some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. and so they try and do the Democrats' work. They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago.
Major, you talked about covering Trump and his movement going back to 2015. You will also remember during that campaign, Hillary Clinton used one word to describe Trump supporters. She called some of them deplorables, right? And that was a seismic shift in what we saw between that race between those individuals. And now he's calling his supporters stupid, and he's calling the people who he has, those folks who have helped him ascend to the presidency, who've given the MAGA movement life, he's calling some of those folks stupid. I get that he's not going to be president in 4 years, but like, is this a good strategy?
It is the strategy he has for the moment embraced until he's forced to adopt another one. He gave a radio interview last night, it was released this morning with John Solomon, in which the president hinted that there might be something involving him in the files, and they would study releasing anything in those files that is credible, putting the president and the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, as the custodians of credibility. Now, we already have things out there in the last 3 weeks from Elon Musk saying Trump's in the Epstein files. Well, Trump came a little bit closer last night to acknowledging that's possibly true. And he may try to say, if there's anything about me in there, that's fake, that's phonied up by Democrats to try to create some other context for this. On this story for the MAGA movement, they have basically come to the determination, Vlad, that they'll be the arbiters of what is credible or not credible. They just want to see what's in there, have the victims protected, but they want to evaluate it on their own, in part because for months, if not years, those closest to President Trump has said this is one of the most important and revealing scandals of how Washington actually operates. And most in the MAGA movement believe because Trump was out an outsider, Trump could not be bought, Trump had clashed with the intelligence community, he alone was positioned to ferret out and deliver unto them the truth. That he is now in a position where he's not only suggesting that might not happen, but that anyone who continues to pressure him for that to happen is a dupe or being duped or has suddenly lost focus and needs to move on, is, again, one of the first dividing lines within the MAGA movement, Trump to it to Trump, that I've seen in almost 10 years, more than 10 years.
Fascinating. Major Garrett, always great to have you. And thank you for getting on the air for us, even though there is a power outage. And you got to show us your office there, but you blurred it. I kind of want to know what's back there now.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Major. You can watch more of Major's conversation with the former vice president on the Takeout's YouTube channel. And, of course, you can stream the Takeout with Major Garrett Monday through Friday at 5 Eastern right here on CBS News 24/7.